Call to order the regular meeting of the United Laguna Woods Maintenance and Construction Committee. It's Wednesday, August 28th at 9 o'clock p.m. in the Community Center boardroom. I want to see an acknowledgement of the media. I don't think there's a media back there. There's only like 2 people there, and I don't think either one of those people is the media. So,
However, we are being filmed.
however, we are being filmed. Approval of the agenda.
I make a motion.
Anybody second it? Any objections? Okay, the motion passes. The approval agenda passes. Approval of the meeting report for June 26, 2019. Could I have a motion, please?
Oh, I move, so move.
Okay, moved and seconded. Any objections? Okay, that's been approved. So let's go on to the chair's remarks. Hopefully people will be watching this, but maybe not. I just wanted to make a couple of comments as far as this, since it's being televised, maybe it'll go out on the airwaves. Anyway, I'd first like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to the 5th MNC meeting with myself as the chair. In my opening remarks, I'd like to take this opportunity to address a couple of items that will be discussed in this meeting. The first of these items will be the project log and the budgets associated with those projects, and the maintenance and construction operating budget. We have not yet voted on the budget for next year. However, many people have heard that we are contemplating an increase that will be in excess of $20 a month. That's still being contemplated. It is a matter of course, just by the nature of things, that M&C and landscaping are major consumers of that budget. Obviously, I can only speak to M&C and its needs as identified in the project log and in the M&C operating budget. Some people say that if we were more efficient or if we had better customer feedback, we would not need to increase the assessments this year. To them, I ask the question, has the cost of all the commodities and utilities you purchase outside the village gone down, or have they gone up? I would venture to guess that they have not gone down. The cost of living in Orange County is one of the highest in the country, and it affects the cost to live in Laguna Woods Village. We are not immune to cost increases, even though some people feel that we are insulated in this community because it costs less to live here with all our amenities than it does in the surrounding areas. Our infrastructure is 50+ years old and it needs to be fixed and improved. Many of the items on the project log reflect infrastructure work, fencing replacements, painting, roofing, piping repair, electrical replacement and repair, gutter replacement and repair, termite infestation, dry well repair, and road work, to mention a few. And that's a lot. These are not nice to have items. These are need to have items. United is trying to spend our budgeted money wisely. I challenge anyone that is out there that if they can spend the money more wisely than our board, then that person should run for the board and that person can take my seat. We are doing the best that we can. There is always someone that can come up with a short-sighted idea that is either not based in fact or is going to cost twice as much in the future, i.e. penny wise, pound foolish. But that is not the way it should be done, and I personally do not agree with those ideas. With regard to that, I've asked Ernesto to address, and he'll do that as maybe part of his update, the fact that somebody had mentioned the fact that we're paying more money for our dishwashers and various other appliances. Okay, you can buy them in Home Depot for, a quarter of the, 2/3 or 3/4 of the price that we can pay them over here. I asked Ernesto to address that in an email. He did that, and he came up with very good explanation as to why. And actually, in most cases, okay, it's costing us less. But don't forget, when you buy a dishwasher at Home Depot, you don't have a lifetime warranty associated with it. You don't have all of those things where they fix it every other day. So this is something that needs to get addressed, and maybe he can paraphrase some of the things in his email when he does his report. The second item that I would like to touch on, and that will be discussed today at this meeting, is the Solar Task Force report. That was attached to last month's meeting report and is part of the agenda today. You'll see it in this agenda. This power plant, today, since its publication and its issuance at the last meeting, certain people have come forward and taken issue with some of the items mentioned in that report. First, let me say that the report was generated to review our solar power plant that provides energy to our laundry facilities and also some of the generated energy we sell back to SCE. This power plant was envisioned as an electrical cost savings enterprise for United, since the cost of electricity is going up every year and the cost of electricity is not cheap in Orange County. The task force took on this review to determine if our solar power plant was doing what it was intended to, and to determine if there was something that we could be doing to make it better for the future. The report was intended to determine the history of its implementation and determine if its current management could be improved. As a matter of the process for determining the history of its implementation, we found that some of the history was not documented, and so the report, as currently published, was based on doing a lot of searches and asking questions. When we published the report, we thought we had all areas covered. However, since then, it has come to light that some of the published information was inaccurate. And as a result, some of the published information, not all, just some. And as a result of these inaccuracies, we were laying blame for mistakes, and that may have been made. First off, laying blame was not the intent of the report, and some of the inferred mistakes were not correct due to the inaccurate information. To correct any inaccuracies, we are revising the report. In conclusion, the report that is in today's agenda, the one here, is in the process of being revised. So wait until the new report is issued before you question its contents. In addition, you will note that I am one of the signatories on that report. However, if I had known that there were inaccuracies in the report, and if I would have read this report with the perspectives of the people that took issue with it in mind, I would not have signed it as written. However, we will now fix it. And yesterday we had our first meeting of the Solar Task Force to address the corrections that will need to be made. As a part of our meeting today, we will verbally address the report. However, as a result of yesterday's meeting, we may not have much to say until we revise the report. The meeting lasted 2 hours yesterday. This thought of the day, as I have done in the past, I would like to end my opening remarks with a thought for the day. And this thought for the day comes from Mahatma Gandhi, and it also tries to counter those people that want to say that the solar power plant should not have been built. I do not see how a person that is thinking of the future and a person that is paying escalating electric bills from SCE can question its existence. Anyway, Gandhi made the following remarks. He stated, "It's the action, not the fruit of the action that's important. You have to do the right thing. It may not be in your power, may not be in your time, that there'll be any fruit. But that doesn't mean you stop doing the right thing. You may never know what results come from your action, but if you do nothing, there will be no result." With that, I'd like to open the floor up to member comments.
I do not have any member comments.
Okay, maybe a short meeting. Okay, department head update.
Mr. Chair, board members, good morning. As you may recall, there's a couple items that I'm going to address during my comments. One of them is the issue with the statements that were made relative to our purchase of dishwashers in the community. The other item that I want to address is drainage concerns. As you're all aware, we've had some considerable discussion as to drainage issues in our community that have really not been addressed over the years. And the action that has been taken by the boards was to address the problems that this drainage concerns are causing, and not really the root causes. So we talked about refocusing that approach to be able to handle some of the drainage issues. And specifically, most of them cause problems for us related to footings, related to walls, related to our building structures. These structures are designed on the basis of certain loads and certain capacity of the soil to be able to hold these loads. Well, when the soil is saturated, it can no longer hold the loads as they were intended to. And then the weight of the walls and the foundations either crack or the walls rotate. So the board has allocated funding to address these problems on a contingency basis. But we haven't really focused on getting to the root of it, which is the drainage issue. So the discussion that we had during the budget was that we should allocate additional funding in future budgets to address the drainage concerns. The suggestion that I made is that we have funding right now allocated in various programs in your budget as contingency funding. We have contingency funding in your building structures. We have contingency funding in your wall item. We also have contingency funding in your reserves for foundations. So the suggestion that I made was, if you look historically, we don't utilize all of that funding because it's really an insurance for us to have that money allocated in the event that these things occur. When they do occur, they're expensive, so we have the money available for it. So my suggestion was, let's look at these contingency funds to address the drainage problem that is causing the problem. So what we're doing is we're looking at these items, and if we don't have any expenditures towards the second quarter of the year, we will be ready, we staff will be ready for you to address drainage concerns with that money. So we don't come back, we don't come to the end of the year and say, board, here's $20,000 you put in there, there's $20,000 back because we didn't use it. We're actually redirecting that funding to address the drainage concerns that caused those problems. So today, what I wanted to do is just run through a PowerPoint. So we began to do that. We did not allocate additional funding in your budget. And the way we're addressing is through these contingency funds that you already have in the budget. So there was no impact to your budget related to this. But we are refocusing our entire approach. So we've already began to do that. And we have some photographs and of some of the work that we've done. In addition to correcting the problem that exists, we're also addressing the drainage concerns. So if we could have the PowerPoint. So here's funding from, is there a way to blow that up? No. There you go. That's better. That's easier to see. So one of these concerns had occurred at 741G, and it was related to a wall settlement. You can see here, if you really look carefully, that the wall has rotated. Obviously, the ground got saturated, and it could not support the loads on the footing, and the footing gave, and the wall rotated. Obviously, that's not a condition that we want to have. It could lead to cracking on the masonry, so we don't want that. So we did address the problem of the wall. We did remove the cover structure that you see there, and we corrected the rotation on the wall, as you can see on the bottom picture. But in addition to that, we removed the patio cover, which was causing some of the drainage to end up right next to the wall. And the downspouts were removed. The downspouts that had They had been installed with that cover. We're actually dumping the water right next to the wall. And we also removed the hedge on the east side of the block wall, and we removed the irrigation that was actually being directed to the wall foundation. So that's one drainage improvement that we made at that location, in addition to correcting the problem that the drainage had caused. You see, go to the next. This one, it's at 453C, and this has to do with roof drainage. And the issue was that the entry floor was buckling. The resident had claimed that the buckling occurred after the heavy rains, which makes a lot of sense. A lot of this water was not directed away from the building, and it swelled, the ground right next to it swells, and then it cracks the foundation. And then when the moisture goes away, it shrinks, and then it cracks the slabs even more. So part of the drainage improvements that we made here is we added rain gutters, and then to direct that water away. Can I have the next one, please? The next one. These are additional pictures of that occurrence there. This is at 806A. And again, we have a patio wall that was leaning, and it's cracked, as you can see on the bricks there. If you can keep going down, the patio wall slab, was actually cracked as well. The drainage repairs that we made with this is that we regraded the area to slope the dirt away from the patio. And we directed the irrigation away from the wall, and we installed a rain gutter and downspout to connect to an area drain. So that area where that wall is at right now will be totally dry in the future. And you can see the gutter and the downspout that was installed at that location. And next one was. This one again, roof drainage and slab settlement. The issue is a concrete patio slab was separating from the building. Again, it's the result of saturated soils swelling up and lifting up the slab and cracking it. We perform a structural evaluation, and of course the result was that the oversaturation of the soil, which tends to cause the foundation to crack. You can see in the picture below that the actual damage that had been caused to the slab at the building location. What we did here was in addition to repairing the slab, we'll be installing rain gutters and a downspout on the south side of the building. The downspout will be directed away from the building, and there's a picture of the gutter and the downspout. Here's another one. This is a retaining wall. And this is a classic problem. In addition to dumping water and a planter that has a retaining wall directly to it, the drainage on the retaining wall was poorly designed to begin with. So what happens is that structural engineers designed these retaining walls to retain dirt, not to retain a swimming pool. So what happens is when you dump water into them, and you don't provide an outlet for that water, you have, in addition to the stresses resulting from the soil, you have very high stresses resulting from the water pushing on the wall. So again, this is the result of those problems.
Isn't this the one that I send you the picture of?
That is the one.
So if anybody sees cracks in walls and they're buckling or what have you, and you see them in the community, okay, see something, say something, because, this could be, I saw this as a buckling wall, and the possibility, it reaches a certain point, and then all of a sudden, it could topple over, okay? And it's a dangerous situation, so I pointed that out to Ernesto, and not because I'm a genius here, but, I just happened to see it, and it's obvious, so I just sent it in as an email to him.
So what we did with this one, we advertised an RFP to replace a retaining wall, but in addition to that, to install a French drain that could remove the hydraulic forces on the wall and not stress it. again, that we'll be connecting the downspout to the French drain and diverting the water away from the building and drain the water from the retaining wall. And that should take
One
care
more
of.
thing, Ernesto.
Yeah.
In that previous picture. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that one, you're seeing a ficus tree. Right there. That could be also a danger.
Absolutely. Ficus trees have very aggressive root systems, and they will demolish your foundations and your slabs, and it's not a good tree to plant right next to a building, though. Frankly, I don't know if staff is looking at that, but I will talk to Kurt about the possibility of adding root barriers to either delay the growth of the roots or the possibility of removing the tree. Yeah, so we'll look at that. The next one, please. This one here has to do with the foundations that are actually supporting the floors. And it has to do not only with drainage, but it has to do with the fact that the soils have very high concentrations of
Sulfur.
of sulfur that are very corrosive to the metal. So you can see here we expose this foundation on top of a wall, and all the rebar associated with that little footing there is practically gone. So again, the erosion initially has to do with the water intrusion in these areas. But as we exposed it, we found that the soils are hot. They have high sulfur contents. So we are taking care of that. There's more pictures of the problems that the soil causes by pushing on these retaining walls and these foundations. And you can see again in the last picture the eroded anchor bolts for these footings that are essentially gone. And they need to be replaced completely. So again, we took money that was allocated for these repairs, and we're actually doing drainage improvements with them to prevent this from occurring in the future. And I think that was that the last one? Yeah.
That is what you run under the Shepherd's Crook pictures. And put this information here. Shepherd's Crook.
Okay. So that's that report on the drainage and how we're using your funding, your contingency funding, to address drainage issues in the community. I also wanted to talk about Shepherd's Crooks.
Hold on one second.
Sure.
We got some questions. How many sites have we got? Do you have a estimate of how many sites have you seen, and how much more do we need to do?
No, because this is addressed in a reactive manner, like Carol said. You say something gets done. We're not going out and inspecting every site, but as we notice that there are issues with walls, foundations, we address them. Also, remember, you allocated additional funding next year to address some of the drainage concerns up front proactively. Will be as part of the prior to paying program. We'll be looking at eaves that don't have, in some instances, don't even have fascia boards. So we'll be adding the fascia boards. We'll be adding the gutters and downspouts. And as part of that program, we'll also be making sure that the water doesn't dump right there next to them. That it gets directed either to an area drain, or we'll create a French drain for that. But it's a reactive program, so I couldn't tell you, how many out there.
But next year, there's the proactive and the reactive program.
That is correct, both. Okay. So we're still recommending that you budget the contingency funds for the foundations, the walls, and we will continue to use that funding to address drainage improvements. So.
Well, I think this is a great example, and I hope maybe you'll show this during your report at our board meeting, because this is why we need a strong reserve. Contingency funds are in our reserve. When something comes up, like the huge rains that we've had this year, that we don't usually have, but we weren't expecting. They're the ones that bring to light problems like this. So while we've been concentrating on sewer lines and copper piping and that kind of thing, all of a sudden, we see another problem, our drainage, which is also a big structural problem for the mutual that we have to take care of. And I don't think our residents really understand that something like this may come up every year. This is what it is now. But with aging infrastructure like we have, there's going to be something, and that's why we need to keep our reserves as strong as possible.
Yes, sir.
In fact, that previous photo, the 2137 building, it looks like it is inside and it's not obviously visible.
It's not.
Yeah, so I think what we should do, since we have older structures, we should have some kind of program to inspect a few buildings, especially something that are two-story like that one looks like, on a slope. We should inspect those because in case of an earthquake, that's serious situation.
Right, so you have a very large number of structures in the community. An inspection effort would be something that we could get an outside company to actually do for us. We cannot divert staffing that we have addressing your normal programs to do that. So, but what we could do is, if that's the direction, we could use some of your contingency funding towards the end of the year and get an inspection company to come in and start creating a list for us.
I was
of
more
proactive
thinking
ways.
like our own staff can.
Where our own staff, it's out there every day, and whenever they see something, they create a ticket or they forward it to the right department. But they will not go in these crawl spaces and chip at a footing to be able to tell you whether that footing is undermined or not. They rely on what they see as they're doing their other work. So we do that on a regular basis. So I've been asked, well, are you guys inspecting? Yeah, we're inspecting daily. We got eyes in the community daily. We're out there. And whenever we see things, we report them to the proper department and they get addressed. So there is an effort to do that. But if you want a focused effort where you want a company to come in and actually do this on a proactive basis and create a capital improvement program for you, we can certainly do that. We will have to go out and get that done.
No, but how often does your staff go into the crawl space? Never, right?
No, they do. They
without-
do. Yeah, whenever we have reports on excessive moisture in a unit, we go out there. If there is issues related to water heaters, some of them are located in those areas. So there's a number of instances where they actually go in there and take a look. They will take the grill down and they take a peek in there. I crawled in there in a couple locations because we had claims that there was settlement occurring in the building. So I had to go in there and see for myself that the settlement was being caused by drainage concerns. Moisture issues are typically the main reason why we go in there. Somebody's claiming that they feel that there's excessive, moisture in their living room, and those living room walls are adjacent to those crawl spaces. So we go in there and inspect for that to see because the way they're designed, you have landscaping on top here, and then you have a crawl space here, and then you have a living room wall here. So that crawl space is supposed to be very well drained, but it's a challenge because you have landscaping on top, and that's getting irrigated constantly. So some of that goes into the moisture, into the crawl space. So there are ways to prevent that moisture from actually migrating, but nonetheless, unless you de-landscape, you have to deal with that moisture, and you have to make sure you have adequate ways of handling it. So we do go in there, like I said, not proactively, more of a reactive effort. But then again, that's the nature with the staffing that we have. That's what we're able to do.
Yes.
Ernesto, on that very last picture, the foundation that's missed, the rebar's falling apart on, the structural engineer has probably said there's no danger, immediate danger.
That is correct. And that's typical in most of these situations. like the wall that's rotating, the foundation that's being undermined. Typically, you don't get a catastrophic, change.
Even in an earthquake?
In an earthquake, you definitely would.
Can we shore that up or put bands around it temporarily to keep it from falling apart?
Well, it's being addressed, now. So we're on it right now. So we anticipate that in a couple of weeks, the issue should be resolved.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But if it's there, it might be
So
out
we
of place.
we got earthquakes on hold until.
Yeah, along with everything else.
You told Chief Moy that.
With regard to this particular issue, okay, it's a very important issue, especially in those multi-story buildings, okay, whereby the possibility of an earthquake, as we've seen, earthquakes have then become a little bit more, they've blossomed again in California. So we need to address that. But I'd like to go back and restate the fact that it's incumbent on the population here in the community that if they do see something, they should say something. You don't have to be an engineer. It's obvious as the nose on your face sometimes if you see. I mean, there was an anchor bolt that was completely exposed, okay? That's not normal, okay? So, I mean, not that I'll ask you to go crawling into crawl spaces, but at least things that you see, like I saw that wall, okay, and I made mention of it. But with regard to the possibility of using contingency funds for doing some sort of work towards the end of the year, what have you, hiring a consultant or what have you, okay? Well, I guess we'll see what we can do. We have a couple of more meetings to basically decide that, I suspect, or at least for the next meeting, okay, because we're going to be 2 months, okay? So do we want to put together some sort of a proposal for this, or what?
Well, all I would need is direction. We have structural engineer with annual contracts on board that are servicing all of our deck inspections, our beam inspections, our dry rot. So we have a small army of structural engineers ready to go. We just need direction as to whether you want to divert some of those funds to have a proactive program. Now, another thing I'd like to mention is that we've changed our approach over the past 3 years or so. In the past, there was a lot of passion paint, and you've heard this before, okay? We're not doing the passion paint dance anymore. We're actually looking at the root causes of problems. We are digging into the beams. We're looking at foundations. We're not just patching them. And we are using a lot more structural engineers to come up with complete solutions to the problems. This is, I guess, the fault of having an engineer running your department. I'm looking at those issues. How can we resolve them from the get-go without having to just make it pretty and move on? So we've changed a lot of that. So a lot of that is occurring. Your prior to paint program, we do a lot of structural engineering with that when we find that the material has been undermined. We're doing that through your building structures programs as well. So we're constantly looking for those issues. So my suggestion to you was that instead of creating a new program, to continue to use your contingency funding to do that. Instead of just leaving the money on the table at the end of the year because we didn't find one, just continue to use that to address the root problems with the drainage. And if you give us direction to get a structural engineer to go out there, we can give them several cul-de-sacs and turn them loose and tell them, go out there, inspect the structures, and I guarantee you that they'll find something, because they were built many years ago. A lot of them, they're all code compliant as per the previous codes, but if you have a structural engineer look at them, they'll find something that needs to be done. Now, there are concerns with that because you're essentially creating what in the business is called constructive notice. Once you find something and you report it, you better act on it. So it's going to require you to allocate additional funding to address these things. Some of you were, I know you were on the board when we had discussions about liquefaction in the community, And there were suggestions made, well, let's hire a soils engineer to go out there and identified every single location where liquefaction could be an issue with our building. What I guarantee you that we could find quite a few. Now, are the buildings safe as they are right now? Yes, they are safe. Were they built to code? They were built to code. But if you look into them in depth, you will find issues that could be resolved or may need to be resolved, in the future. But again, once you have a report on that, you'll be put in the position of having to fund a lot of that. Legally, you'd be required to. You have constructive notice. So just be aware of that. And
Well, it was my understanding also that liquefaction, the type of earthquakes we would get here in this particular area, okay, liquefaction really would not come into the play that much. That was my understanding.
there's a couple areas in the community. We have the water table is high enough that could affect some of our structures. But we feel, I personally feel, and I'm a registered civil engineer, that all your buildings are adequately built and they're safe. Can we do more to make them safer? You can always do more to make them safer. But what I'm suggesting to you is all the programs that you have in place and all the work that you're doing on your structures, it's adequately addressing, those upgrades. So be careful to look deeper because you will find things that could improve the structures. And then you'll be in a position of having to fund them.
Well, okay, I hear what you're saying, and this is a double-edged sword here. I understand the legal implications here also, but at the same time, we've got a situation whereby if we do nothing, and then we just find it in time, okay, and then something happens, okay, well, then it just happened. If we do something by doing inspections, they'll find something. But the somethings that they find sometimes are just nice to have versus need to have. Like if they found the fact that the rebar was completely exposed and that anchor bolt was completely taken away from the concrete there where it's no longer in touch with the concrete, that is something that needs to get addressed, okay?
Absolutely.
So, I mean, I understand you're trying to steer us towards the right answer, but at the same time, you're putting a little bit of fear into the fact that we may find something that we may not want to do anything about. And if we do find something that really needs to get done like that, then we really do need to do something
Right,
about
but
that.
what I'm suggesting to you is that the majority of your structures are adequately designed and adequately built and are in good shape.
Right.
They're not, this is more the exception of what you're seeing there. And the reason why we actually investigated that is because we're seeing surface cracks. Typically, if you don't have a surface crack, you don't have a problem with corrosion in the rebar. That's the first thing that happens to the concrete when the rebar corrodes. A corroded bar takes a lot more volume than an intact bar. So when it corrodes, it pushes the concrete out and it spalls it, creates that surface crack, and that's when we notice it, and then we address it. But I suggest to you that the majority of your structures don't have these problems. This is more of an exception than a rule.
Yes.
Do you need any motion to apply contingency funds on a regular basis? If so, we'll make one.
No, I think that we had this discussion during the budget, and when you were considering adding additional funding to do drainage improvements, and we had the discussion about using contingency, and that was the direction. So we're moving forward with that, and this is evidence of that we're doing that for you. So I just want to make sure that you know that we're following the direction, and this is what we're doing, and we're adequately spending your contingency funds. Now, if you would like to direct us to, in addition to doing this, to get a structural engineer to go out there, and we'll give them a list of locations and create a list of things that could be improved, or could be, or something that needs to be addressed right away, then we would do that. We would do that. And then we have to come back to you and let you know how much money you need to allocate to make those improvements.
Well, my concern would be the fact that the guy goes out there and basically starts looking at things that in today's world are code issues, but back then were not. And now all of a sudden he's saying we have to actually apply those particular code things to today. That is, to me, not really realistic.
Right.
We're looking for things, I mean, you can get the average, you can get me, okay, go out there and see that the rebar is, you know, that type of an inspection is what we'd be looking for today and not going out
And we're
there.
doing that. I'm suggesting that we're doing that. When
Okay.
we're out there, we're looking at things like that. And if there's a crack, we inspect further and we analyze further. The direction that we could give the structural engineer is go out there and inspect all the surface damage that may occur and let us know if you feel that those need to be investigated further, without looking at things that could be brought up to code if they're not
Exactly.
damaged at this
And
point.
that's where we would want, if we decided to do this, I think that's where we would want to go with
Right.
that, okay?
Right, but-
That's what I'm trying to get.
But if they do find cracks or anything, we would again have to do some destructive testing to get to the root of the problem. That's additional costs, and we will have to let you know, because we don't know. Until we actually go out there and we start shipping it things and we see what the extent of the solution is, that's when we actually have the cost. And that's an estimate at that point, because we still have to put it out to bid. So, but we can certainly do that for you.
Yes, Sue?
Is there any way we could do it on a triage basis, that we get this list and we put, get the list and say, in 10 years, we're going to take care of the bottom of the list and, move up the list in a triage manner, saying that if we have somebody go out and find all these things, then we put the list together, which are the most important, and we take care of the top 3 or 4 where funding is available, and then the next year we take care of the next 3 or 4 and so forth. Is that a valid way of doing it legally?
Absolutely, and that's in fact the way I would propose it. If you tell us to go out and hire a structural engineer to look at everything that you have, all your structures, he will come up with a long list of items.
Right.
And then what I would do is I would take that and I would turn it into a long-term program. That releases you from the liability of not acting on something that is found. Of course, the structural engineer will have the responsibility, because of his license, to actually point out issues to us that are immediate. So he will have to have a priority list of immediate things, impending concerns, or things that could be improved, or things that need to be investigated in the future, some sort of criteria.
Right, criteria.
Yeah. But we
So-
would put it into a long-term list,
list.
because obviously you don't want to go out and fund $3 million worth of improvements.
Well, and we also would not want to make this into one of the summer projects, okay, whereby the guy is going to be doing this forever, okay? I think we should create a list of where we've seen things in the past and make that the top priority items, and then go down the list, okay, from those less priority. Like in this particular application, we've seen it in these cases, this particular types of buildings have seen this problem if they're located here on the west side or the east side. Or
Right,
whatever.
right. And that's part of the process. I'm already ahead of you. I already got the program in my head.
Oh, okay.
What we would do is essentially anything that's flat on a slab, we would not even look at.
Okay.
We would look at two-story structures.
Okay.
We would look at anything that has a crawl space.
Mm-hmm.
So I would direct staff to put together a list of priority models that we feel would be more susceptible to that. So we wouldn't turn the structural engineer loose and I'll go look at a community and tell us what's the problem. No, we would prioritize. I would most likely recommend that we remove anything that's flat and grade. So, but we would do that if that's the direction, if you want us to do that. And then I would put together a scope of work with our staff and get a couple of structural engineers to give us proposals to do that.
Well, based on the infrastructure the fact that it's 50 years old and our infrastructure obviously has been seeing water and what have you, and drought issues, okay? That also compounds the thing. You know, you get rainy seasons and then drought seasons. I think we should at least put together a priority list of those things and then review it and then determine whether or not we want this structural engineer to go forward with it. I suspect, do we need a motion on that?
Not today.
Not today.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm a little confused. You mentioned we have structural engineers under contract,
That is correct.
and they, within their scope of work, they can't do that? Go out and look and check out the work?
Oh, absolutely. They can do that and more for you.
Well, you mentioned we'd have to hire somebody.
Well, we will have to get proposals from them to address the scope. So if I have 3 structural engineering firms on board as part of your annual contracts, then I would go to all 3 and tell them, this is the scope of work that I want you to address. I want you to go out there, put your head inside that crawl space, and tell me if you see anything that needs to be addressed and prioritize it for me. So that would be essentially my scope. I would take that, give it to 3 structural engineers, and see who comes up with the best value for your dollar.
And that doesn't fall under the current scope of work?
No. Their current scope is actually to address issues that we find, cracks that we find, like such as this one. Go out there and tell us how we're gonna repair that.
Thank
You
you.
know, because we can do that. I mean, I've done that in my prior life, but I don't have a structural engineer's registration, and the board needs to have that stamp for liability reasons, so.
Understood.
How much, do we have extra money for structural engineers at the end of the year? Could we give them this go-ahead to do this after you get their bids in?
Well, you know, there's an opportunity cost. So you have contingency funding allocated, which I'm using for drainage improvements. My direction to staff is that I don't want to see any money left on the table by the end of the year. I want to be able to utilize all the funding that you give us.
Right.
To address the problems. But there's, like I said, an opportunity cost. So if you ask me to get proposals for a structural engineer and get a structural engineer working on a list, some of that funding will be allocated to that. So there will be no physical work performed for drainage issues because it will be allocated to maybe structural engineering reports.
Well, I think we should look at getting their input as to what it would cost us to go do.
Oh, certainly, I can do that. All I need you to tell me is that you're interested in doing that.
Yeah.
And I'll begin to look at it.
Okay, that's,
We're definitely interested in doing that because under the circumstances, okay, seeing these things here, I mean, I didn't need to see it. I know that over time, it's 50 years old, this place, okay? I mean, stuff happens, okay?
Yeah.
And we have water damage and what have you, okay? Dry rot and what have you. So, I mean, we need to do something, okay? And we got to keep the people in the community safe, okay?
Of course.
And, you know, not to say that any of these things the building's going to come down tomorrow, okay? It may not have come down at all, but you have to at least sort of like be a little bit more safety-minded, okay?
Right. And that's a very good point. None of this is an impending collapse.
Right.
Okay, so nobody's in danger here. Do we want to make it safer? Of course, we want to make it safer. You know, so, but we'll do that. So what I'm going to do, relative to this discussion, I'm going to put together a scope of work with my staff. We'll run it up a couple of structural engineers and see what kind of proposals we get. If those proposals seem to be reasonable, then we'll go ahead and get them going on a list of priorities that we will
Right.
come up ourselves. You don't need board action. You don't need to act on any of this.
Okay.
All I need is just direction to move forward.
Great. Does anybody have
Just one
taking
quick-
exception to this? Hold on one second. Does anybody take exception to what just got mentioned here?
Not at all.
Not at all. Yes.
One thing I was kind of wondering, your budget that you're talking about contingency, that's item number 7 on this thing, prior to paint? Or 987,000?
No, you have contingency budget in your building structures. You budgeted 135,000, I'm sorry. So you have contingency budget in your building structures. You budgeted approximately $135,000 this year for that. So we were talking about diverting some of that towards your drainage improvements. You have funding in your foundation program. You budgeted about $44,000 this year. So we're going to be diverting some of that for drainage. You also have funding in your common wall replacement. You budgeted $22,000 for that, so we're going to be diverting some of that for drainage as well. So that's essentially where the funding will come from.
Thank you.
Okay. So that's that on the thing. Then you wanted to go into the appliances.
Absolutely. So staff was asked to provide some information relative to statements that were made concerning dishwasher purchase from the mutual and the cost of those dishwashers. The implication was made that the cost that we're using, that we're budgeting for these dishwashers was much higher than the cost of an appliance that you can purchase from Home Depot or Lowe's. So we looked into the costs, and you'll find that if you do this research yourself, that the cost that was provided for that particular appliance, for that dishwasher, in the $500 range, it's a cost just purchase the appliance. It has no installation cost at all. So if you actually request a quote for the installation to be added to that, then you're looking at in a much higher range. We used an average cost of about $643 for the purchase and installation of that appliance. We have excellent pricing on our appliances because we buy in bulk. We buy large quantities. We negotiate contracts through GRF, and we piggyback on those contracts. And because we're buying a ton of these things, the prices go down. So I challenge you to get a better price for the appliance itself, from Lowe's or Home Depot. But now you add the installation costs, and then that's an additional cost that you have to consider before you do the comparison. So the comparison that was provided is really not complete. It's missing information. Relative to the funding that we put in there for this appliance is about $643 we had included in there in the budget, I think, for each one of them. Includes permitting costs from the city that they were tagging on to this installation, which is ludicrous. We should not be paying for any permitting costs to install a dishwasher. So we had conversations with the city, and that has been removed since. So your costs are actually, you're going to see a lower price coming through because we're not tagging that permitting cost any longer. So hopefully that gives you a synopsis of what we found and how those prices were compared.
And I believe in your email also and the discussion that we had, okay, for the most part, this applies to it applies to all the appliances for which we are providing it, okay, whereby our costs are a lot cheaper than what you can get on the outside because of volume, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you. Yes.
Go ahead.
As you mentioned before, besides the appliance and the installation, you have to consider all of the maintenance and repair that we do through the co-op program that would not be.
That is correct. But we budget that separately. That's through your maintenance programs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the statement that was made was relative to the purchase of the appliance itself. Yeah. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes my department head update. Shepherd's Crooks, are you going to be pulling the project log from the consent?
Yes.
You will be discussing?
No, not the project log. No, it's fine.
Okay,
No.
so if you're not going to do that, then I can talk about Shepherd's Crooks.
Consent calendar as it is. I have nothing on the project log that I'd like to see pulled, so unless somebody else on the committee needs to have that pulled, I'd just like to go down to the consent calendar and then ask for a motion to approve the consent calendar as it is.
Well, I would like to look at the maintenance program expenditures.
Okay, so you want to pull that?
I would like to pull that.
Which one, item 10?
Item 10.
So, anybody have any objections to pulling item 10 as a consent calendar and putting it down as item number?
You can actually leave it in place and we discuss it in place, you know.
No, we're saying we're pulling it out of the consent calendar, we're gonna discuss it separately. Because the consent calendar, we only approve the consent calendar in total. We don't discuss.
Right, so Mr. Chair, the motion would be to discuss item 10 and move the rest of the consent calendar as is.
Correct.
I second that.
Okay, so
I first
I'd like to have a motion to approve the consent calendar without item 10 in it.
I make that motion.
Any objections? Okay, consent calendar is approved.
Very good, so, Mr. Chair, if I may then, Juanita asked the question about the shepherd's crooks. We're currently fabricating in fabrication for the shepherd's crooks. So as soon as we have that, that takes a little bit of time to go through that process. They have to not only fabricate them, but then they have to powder coat them, and that's another process to the fabrication. So at this point, we're in that process. We're in the fabrication process. Once we complete that, we'll begin the installation process, and I'll update you as where we're at, which areas we're going to be installing first. And with that also goes the removal of the vegetation adjacent to the walls, the reparation of the damage that this vegetation has caused. And all of that this year is included in that contract. As you may recall, when we made a recommendation to move forward with this contract, we pointed out that this is a very good price for us because in prior years, we actually not only had to pay for the fabrication and installation of the shepherd's crooks, but we had to pay for a separate company to come in and do all of your clear and what we call clear and grubbing, which is the removal of all the vegetations. In addition to that, then we had to engage our general services department to go out there and repair all the blocks that were damaged because of the trees actually pushing on them and cracking them before we even began the installation. This year, we included all of that in the scope of work for the Shepherd's Crook contractor, and the prices actually were much more favorable than we had last year, including all of the costs. So that's where we're at with that.
Hold on one second. I have a question with regard to one of our members, and I thought that Tim and you were getting together with regard to that section of fence over there where people are hopping the fence, and he said that they should actually be, the Shepherd's Crook portion should be at least 2 or 3 feet higher than what is currently installed right now.
That is correct. So what we were going to do for that, if you may recall that discussion, is that we currently don't have those areas as part of the priorities that Chief Moy and his staff came up with, but you felt that we needed to address that. So my recommendation is, and what I suggested to do is go to the contractor and get a price to see what it would cost to actually remove and either extend those if that's a possibility. If that's not a possibility, to actually remove them and replace them, which it would be kind of a shame because we already paid for it, but we're getting those prices from the contractor. What I would recommend to you, once I have those prices, I'll bring them to you and you'll know what we're looking at. But my recommendation would be that we address all of the other areas that don't have shepherd's crooks. And then when we complete that program, we come back and look at those areas. Because, you're going to be addressing something that already has shepherd's crooks. We all know that they're too low, so they're a problem, but they're already there. Other areas don't have them at all. So that would be my recommendation. Bring you a cost to do that, but kind of put it at the tail end of what Chief Moy has recommended in terms of security issues.
Now, I understand what you're saying, where you're coming from, but under the circumstances right now, this individual, Shepherd's crooks, okay, are supposed to take the place of the barbed wire, okay, and it's supposed to be a safety concern for the village, okay, whereby people are not able to hop the fence. We're seeing that the people are hopping the fence in this location, which means that it's now not safe anymore. Yet, under the circumstances, we'd be still trying to address those areas that don't have shepherd's crooks, but yet they do have barbed wire, okay? And the shepherd's crooks made it a little bit more sightly rather than unsightly, okay? But it still has something there that sort of like protects us, if you will, for lack of a better word, okay?
So what I would suggest is that we're going to get you a proposal anyway to see what it takes to remove and replace those things. So we can put that under your items for future agendas so that we don't lose track of it. And then once we have the proposals from the installation contractors, we'll bring those to you. And at that point, you can direct us to forget the list that we put together with security. Let's address this first.
I think that would be a way to go, okay? Does anybody have any objections?
I think
to
it
that?
is a priority because we are not seeing people jump where the barbed wire is, and this is a priority. And the people that are coming in are not desirable.
Okay, so we'll bring it back to you.
Okay.
Please. So, does this have to do with this?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
please.
Again, this is probably one of the biggest issues that I get calls on. And it's not just from that area in back of the shopping center, the Aldi shopping center and all, where, quite frankly, the wall is too low. The shepherd crooks are okay, but the wall is easily, you step on the wall and just over. And we've talked about, you talked about taking out vegetation. We've talked about putting in vegetation, something that would help to deter people going over the wall there. But I'm also getting quite a few calls from around the Gate 5 area. Apparently, again, it's easily trans-jumped. And I asked them to take pictures. And I'm waiting for those pictures because she says I sit on my patio and I watch them 2-3 times a week. Choo, choo, choo. And by the time security gets there, because I call security immediately, they're gone. And that's the way that, security cannot help in those situations. It takes them too long to respond, even if they come right out. So I think we are doing a really good job proactively, but not as good a job reactively as we're going to have to do.
I'm in agreement. I think right now we need, as a priority, look at those areas where we actually see people hopping the fence, even though we've got shepherd's crooks, okay? And the shepherd's crook is not working as well as it was intended to. And I don't know, I mean, it was mentioned by the individual who complained about this that a possibility exists, and I don't know if you could take down those sections of the fence, okay, that are 3 foot or whatever the heck they are, okay, and use them in another location. But, I was told, no, you can't do that. And a lot of people say you can't do a lot of things, but maybe you can. I don't know.
Or just increase the wall and then put them back on.
So that is a pretty tall order to increase the wall height. And I'll tell you why, because we've already investigated that. We had concerns about noise around El Toro, around Gate 1 area. I don't know if you're aware of that, but we've gotten those over the years. So we looked at the possibility of extending the existing wall. And what we found is that in order to extend that wall, you actually need to increase the footing size of the existing wall. And not to be a pessimist, but when we looked at the existing wall as it is, with current codes, the footing that we have right there doesn't even meet current codes. So if we were to touch that wall, it would require us to extend the footing depth. It would require us to actually remove a section of block so that we can pour concrete in it and put rebars to tie it into the footing. You're almost better off demolishing the wall and building a new one. at a very high cost. These walls are not cheap. So we looked at that. So the best case scenario in extending the height at that location will be to actually remove what we have and put Shepherd's Crook that is much higher. Then we have to actually look at the wall to see if structurally that wall will even be able to do that for us. So it's a little bit more complicated than just slapping
Is it
Shepherd's
possible
Crook on
to
it.
extend Shepherd's Crooks? I mean, is there something that you can add to it to make it taller, or do you have to get all new ones?
No, you could, and this is a conversation we're gonna have with the contractor. You know, how can you get us a Shepherd's Crook that will, give us 7-foot height from the adjacent grade? That's essentially the question. How you do it, I don't care how you do it, you tell me how you're gonna do it, and how much would it cost us to get it done? So they will have to tell us whether you can just weld another piece of tubing to the existing and then be able to bolt that onto the wall. That's a possibility, depending on the condition of what you have there right now. And then you need to look at the wall itself to be able, because now you have a higher moment arm, you have more of a load on the wall itself. So we need to look at all of that, and we'll bring those costs and options back to you for a decision.
Not that I.
want to see it wait.
No, I understand. Not that I want to be the structural engineer here, okay, but under the circumstances, if we do find that the wall itself can't hold the load, okay, then maybe we can extend the Shepherd's Crooks to like 10 foot and actually build a fence in front or in back of the wall, okay?
You could conceivably, that's another option.
Okay,
You
just one
can-
thing.
Yeah, you can drive in structural sections into additional footings and put those adjacent to the wall, leave the wall itself alone.
Right.
And then build a Shepherd's Crook new fencing, if you would, adjacent to the wall to extend it up to the 7 foot. I mean, there's many options.
Yeah, and that's what they have on Ridge Route, actually,
Yeah.
across the street from us.
Right.
It's just a Shepherd's Crook fence, okay?
That's right.
No wall.
Yeah, not, again, your price is climbing up as you
Understood.
do those things, but there's many options.
But to do something with the wall, as you said, okay, and the footings, and then the this and the that, it may be even cheaper just to go with the actual 8-foot, whatever it is.
Right.
We'll
Yeah.
wait and see.
Right, I would definitely recommend against touching that wall at all,
I totally agree.
So would you get us a bid to put in a Shepherd's Crook fence behind it?
We'll look at a couple options and we'll have them propose on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Now, where we are here is the expenditure report, I guess, is that where we are?
In a number of areas, we are way low, and I'm concerned that we're leaving money on the table or whatever. And I was wondering what the situation is. I mean, water heaters were way over, and we understand that one. But I'm looking at the budget versus, and I would expect us to be almost at 50%. And there's a number of areas like ranges that were 19% and things like that. And I'm wondering, do we understand why we're so low and what is the situation?
Absolutely. So let me start by saying that a lot of your programs are seasonal. So in other words, we don't, and this is a discussion that I've had with city councils since I've been in this business. How come you haven't spent the money that we gave you this year? Well, many things don't occur towards the later quarters of the year. Some things that are very typical on that are your paving. We don't
Yeah,
start
I'm
that.
not looking at the top
Uh,
replacements. I'm looking at the appliances and fixtures.
A lot of the appliances are driven by need. If the need
Right.
is not there, then we don't address them. Unless you direct us that you want to proactively start replacing appliances, we don't do that. When we get calls from a resident and tells us that the refrigerator is due, then we replace it. And that is actually codified in your regulations to do that. So many of these don't occur because we just don't get the request. Many others that, as I mentioned, that you don't see any expenditures for the first, second quarter of the year. It's just because that's when we address them. We address them later in the year. So other than that, I'm not really sure what to tell you about that. Does that make any sense?
Well, I understand, I hear what you're coming from, okay, but the thing right now, so our program right now does not, I mean, you assume, I guess, in the budget that you're gonna replace, I don't know, 100 rangers this year, whatever that happens to be. I don't know what the number is. You guys
It's
came up with a number.
138.
138.
Right, it's an
Okay,
educated
and the thing
guess.
right now is that's based on the fact that some of them will be coming due, they're in their end-of-life phase, okay? And that's what we've decided is the end-of-life phase, or we actually have a chart that says, we have a spreadsheet that says that these particular manners are reaching their end of life, and those are the ones we're gonna replace. Because I hear you saying right now that you're only replacing them as people call.
That is
and
correct.
say- And that's different from the fact that we're replacing them on an ongoing basis based on their end of life as the chart or the spreadsheet dictates.
That is correct. They're not like the water heaters where we have a 10-year, boom, we change them because of the damage they cause. Some of these things we don't replace, and again, that's by the regulations that you've approved through your board actions. You know, so we don't go out there and actively replace ranges because they already hit their 10-year. We wait for the resident to call us, or if the manor, when it gets inspected, when it changes hands, we inspect it. If the thing looks like it needs to be replaced, then it gets replaced. And many of them, and you know that, are replaced through the resale process as well. And some of them get put in by the residents themselves.
And this is sort of like a double-edged sword here because we don't replace them because of the fact that nobody's called, yet all of a sudden, within the next year or so, we get 10 calls the first week of January, or 15 or 100 calls, okay, the first week in January about the fact that something that happened last year needs to get replaced this year, okay, whatever it happens to be. So by not replacing them on an ongoing basis, we still budget for the next year. So what do we do with the money that we budgeted for the last year, and now we got it this year? Then we got money on the table from last year for ranges, and then for next year, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to budget for 138 based on some sort of a calculation that was done. So now we've got 276 in the budget?
No, we rebudget the funding. So
rebudget
it
the
doesn't,
funding.
yeah, it doesn't get spent. You know, it's a very difficult logistics for us to.
Oh, I understand.
For us to go out there and actually replace proactively.
No, I understand that too.
Okay, I'm glad you understand that, because it's not easy. But what we do, and we don't see that fluctuation happen, Carl, where if we only replace 20 this year, we get a big onslaught of requests to follow. We don't see that, really. So we look at your historicals, and we budget accordingly. You know, we don't look at the age of the appliance. We just look at, you know, some set aside funding so that we're able to accommodate that. It's very atypical that we exceed that amount, you know. I'm not saying that it wouldn't happen, it could happen, but it's typically we don't.
And a lot of the people, unfortunately, don't let anybody know that they actually changed out their stove or what have you, okay? And that might be something else.
That's
Yes, sir.
that's the other wild card. Yeah, we don't.
Yes, sir.
I really think we need to, when we do our preventative maintenance, we need to put a checklist and see what has been replaced. We really need to have a sense of what is left in the manor that we have to take care of. And you tell us it costs money, but this costs us money too, to put it on this list and not spend the money, and then it's, you know, situation. So I really think that we need a checklist for the preventative maintenance people. When they go in, they check off what has been replaced and that we no longer support, and how much time that would take and what it costs.
Okay, so let me just point something out to you, and just checking with my brains here on the side. We did ask for additional funding for preventive maintenance, and we did point it out to you that it was to check additional items, because you've been telling us, when these guys go out there, make sure you check, you know, the valves, make sure you check the hoses, make sure, don't just go in there and clean up the back of the refrigerator and clean up things that need to be done, but actually do more. So we asked for additional funding for preventive maintenance, and it was turned down. So,
Well, okay, I think, I understand where you're coming from, okay? If they're gonna be checking every single valve and every single hose and what have you, okay, maybe that's gonna take time. But they walk into the kitchen, okay, and they ask the manor owner, okay, or whatever, the,
Two people, right?
stock, whatever, okay, the stockholder,
in 3 years.
what things, I mean, you see that it's not a GE refrigerator, so you know it's definitely been an alteration, okay?
Right.
And you see it's not a GE stove, so you know it's not an alteration either. So, I mean, we're just looking at a 5-minute thing here, okay, for them to check off a list, okay?
Absolutely. So, we have two bodies doing this for the whole community.
Right.
On a 3-year cycle. They're going in there and they're going right through it. If you want additional things added to the list, I suggest that you add additional funding to be able to do this. Right now, what they're doing is, if they delay doing something else, I know it's a 5-minute delay, 5-minute multiplied by all the manners that they do, we will not be able to complete that program in a 3-year program. So if you want to, we can do two things. You can direct us to go to a 4-year program with the two bodies that we have, or we can add additional funding and look at other things such as the hoses, the valves, looking at, one of the things that we talked about, when you go in there and you look at the refrigerator, get the serial number in the refrigerator. Figure out where that refrigerator was replaced, or whether it's owned by the manor owner, or if it's one of our refrigerators. So all of those things take time, and you will not be able to complete that program in a 3-year cycle.
I would make the motion that we go to a 4-year cycle and get this information, because this is really important.
Anybody second it?
I'll second it.
Okay.
But I have a
Anybody have?
question.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Now we can discuss it.
No, we can discuss it, okay. Is it within the realm of possibility, I suppose, that when they are assigned Unit 1, 2, 3 for preventive maintenance this year, that they be given from Stellar the list of alterations that have been made to that unit, so that they can see what's original and what's not supposed to be original, without having to go through and check serial numbers and all of that kind of stuff? Of course, one of the big glaring, as she said, if it's not a GE appliance, you pretty well are sure that it's been replaced.
Well, like I said, all of that can easily be done. It's just more time.
Right.
And you're not going to be able to hit your 3-year cycle. So
Hey,
that
we
can be
gave you
done.
back our 2 handymen.
So that, you can easily do that. But, again,
I am totally in favor of this, okay? I don't think it'll take 4 years, but we can agree to disagree on that, okay? The thing right now is, okay, I think every time we talk about appliances, we keep on talking about the fact, well, we don't know, maybe that manor had replaced all their appliances, we don't know. We only know when we actually have a sale of that manor, and there's a lot of people in here that have never sold their manor. So as a result of that, we know nothing about that manor except for what we may have seen in passing. So I think it's really important for us to get a handle on what it is as far as appliances, because those are big ticket items, okay? The valves on the thing, okay, the valves for the under the sinks or what have you, okay, those take some action because the plumber's got to do something, okay? But the appliances, there's 5 or so appliances that we know nothing about in this particular manner, okay? We only assume that they haven't been replaced, okay? And I think we need to get a handle on that. So I'm all in favor of this also, okay? We need to get a handle on this. And I'm not looking for them to do a lot of stuff. All I'm looking for them to do is saying, the refrigerator, the washer, the refrigerator, the range and what have you, okay, are still all belong to the community, okay?
And I don't think they need the serial number.
I don't think you need a serial number. Oh, yeah, well, I mean, I don't see that a particular need, okay, because I'll tell you, if we install that refrigerator, then when we installed it, don't they take down their serial number, the people that were doing the installing, our refrigerator? don't we have a serial number that they put down when they install the thing? When they
Oh,
take the
ab-
old one out and put the new
No,
one in?
absolutely. When we install a new
So,
refrigerator,
yeah.
we have that serial number.
Yeah, well, I don't think we need that if they decide to go with a Westinghouse, I mean, it's whatever,
Samsung.
call it, whatever, something, Samsung or LG or whatever refrigerator, and we look in there and they say, oh, this is not ours, okay? I mean, it's obvious as nose on your face, okay? So, that's a tick off and say, that one's been replaced. I don't think we need the serial number. I don't think anybody on the committee here feels we need the serial number. We're just looking to see whether or not those refrigerators and the ranges and the dishwashers and all the other stuff that's in there, the big ticket items, have been replaced by them.
So I think
Lisa
that,
had a question.
I think if the direction is to go to 4 years, I think we'll probably accommodate that. Just some of the things that these guys are looking at, it's caulking, they're caulking sinks,
Understood.
basins, tubs, showers, enclosures, tub and shower tile. They're lubricating and adjusting windows and sliding glass door rollers. They're removing, cleaning, and lubricating and reinstalling bathroom exhaust fans. They're removing dust from the coils behind and beneath the refrigerators. They're tightening and adjusting closet door rollers. They're performing leak testing on toilets using blue tablets. They're inspecting sinks, toilets, and basin risers for leaks. They're inspecting and testing all valves and supply lines for signs of deterioration. Again, this is a program that was put in place to keep on top of, what's happening in these units and be able to prevent major cost. But as you can see, there's a large number of things that these two guys are doing on a 3-year cycle. So if you add anything that it's even, it seems like it's minuscule, they will go over that.
Well, they better not be vacuuming out the refrigerator of a refrigerator that we didn't supply. 'Cause-
They wouldn't do mine.
Right. So they know that refrigerator is
No
not
worries.
there, so it doesn't get checked off as one of the items that belongs to us,
No worries.
okay?
No, they would know
Yes.
that. They would know that. They wouldn't do a.
Right, understood.
Ernesto, I have a couple of questions. When somebody calls for appliance replacement, dishwasher, for example, the people who go there, do they ever look at repairing them, or they just replace them?
If it depends on the condition and the age of the refrigerator. If it's something that's over 12 years old,
No,
they're just gonna-
refrigerator, yeah, it takes a long, but simple things like dishwasher has got one motor. Mostly
Repair them when they need.
that can go wrong, so that can be repaired easily. What I'm wondering is that whether they look at this or they just replace it.
No, they don't just replace it. They would look at the condition of the appliance, they will look at the age of the appliance, and they will assess the cost to actually make the repairs. In some instances, it's very costly to make the repairs. If it's replacing of the motor, you may have to order a new motor, and then you may have to spend time, ordering it and installing it and making several appointments. But if the appliance is over 12 years old, why would you want to do that? So they make a judgment call.
Yes, Sue, go ahead.
Okay.
They are looking at everything that we would want to know. They're looking at all of the appliances, they're looking at the floors and the countertops. They are already looking at all these things. All they have to have is a slip of paper to check off. I'm not sure that we're going to be adding that much time to because they already are looking at
Yeah.
every one of those things.
Yeah, I think we need to account, you have another question on this?
Well, I just, sort of in a comment on that, we've been talking about this as long as I've been on the board. We don't have a good count of alterations that have been made. We need that. Because I know in disciplinary hearings, we get people in all the time who say, it's not on my alteration sheet from when I bought it, but it's obviously an alteration somebody put in without a permit, so we didn't know about it. So it is an alteration, but they don't
Right.
understand it or know. I think we need to update that list, and also, I think this would also help in our forecasting with our reserves, how many appliances we need, because we're using a very old formula.
Yeah.
And we really haven't taken into account all of the updates that have been made. And I think just the last 4 or 5 years have been so many more updates than.
Right. Yeah, so
before.
a couple things on that. The databases that we have are truncated when when we transfer the data from PCM to VMS. So we don't have a good historical of all of the things that occurred prior to that.
We need to
So we're collecting that data as things turn over, and we'll have better data in the future. Relative to how you allocate funding for your reserves, you heard from your reserve expert. What you'd use, it's allowances. You know, you're not building a rocket here. Allow certain amount. You don't want to actually get into individual counts. That's what you heard from them. What you want us to do, we'll do whatever you want us to do. But we're constantly incorporating additional information to our databases, and obviously we'll use as much information as we can to give you the best estimates, you know, for your reserves, for your budgeting year to year, and all of that. But we really don't have that. So what we do is we set allowances, just like, you know, all HOAs do.
But the allowances are based on historical data, right?
The allowances are based on historical data. They're based on information that's available from staff and percentages. So because you're guessing at what percentages, it's really hard to tell how many units are going to turn over. It's really hard to tell how many people are going to look at their stove in one day and when they get up and they say, oh my God, this thing needs to be replaced. So all those things are hard to judge. So because of that, the recommendation from your expert was use allowances and see where you're landing with those.
Understood.
But we're obviously relying on as much information as we have.
I think think the people on the committee, unless there's an objection, okay, I think we would like to have that checklist included, and if that means we need to go to a 4-year program, then so be it. I don't believe it does, but that's me. But we need
Okay.
the checklist, okay, to say which appliances have been changed out and which have not. Yes, Sue?
I think you can give them an iPad, they check on the iPad, and then it would automatically go into the database when they downloaded it.
And that's something that we're working with IT.
I
In the
think you need
future-
to look at doing that.
Yeah, in the future, we hope to do that, and we deploy iPads for all of our field people so that they can do that. We're not there yet, so Chuck is working on that. So this would be a recommendation to the board
Yeah.
to look into going to a 4-year program to be able to collect additional
Add
data.
additional data.
Yes.
Yeah.
To give us the time that it takes, so we really feel like we need a full
Yeah.
year
The time that it takes to do what?
to do the checklist. So that we know that right now, you're telling us that we're gonna have to go to a 4-year program.
That is correct.
You have not estimated the time it would take them to do it.
So you want me to calculate the time that it takes for them to do each one of these items and tell you what the additional time will be?
Well, to give us, you need to do that just to have a sense if it's really a 4-year or a 3.5 year or what it is.
Well, we can start collecting it and see if we make the 3-year cycle. How's
Okay.
that? You want us to do that?
Yeah, that's
Very
what we-
good, and then we'll let you know what
That's
we're
fine.
able to accomplish with
Because
it.
as I said, we're only trying to basically get an accounting of what things are not GE that belong to us, okay, in the manner, and I don't see it, you know, there's things that are required to be done by an individual to change valves or what have you, but this is like an eyesight thing. You know, he's looking around and saying, yep, okay, whatever. Yes, Walt?
Ernesto, how much time do you figure for each site visit? Half hour?
For each site visit, you know, I don't have that information. It's managed by our maintenance manager.
Yeah, because I know at my house, they weren't there 15 minutes.
Yeah, and it's probably around that time, what they
Mine-
have allowed it.
Mine's been all remodeled, that's probably the reason why, but there should be an
It
average
makes it a lot
time.
easier, yeah.
Let's make it
So-
20.
But I would, yeah, but I would venture to say somewhere along that timing, but we'll go ahead, so.
Yeah, to come up with a 3-year period, you had to have some kind of.
Yeah.
Right, how much time allowed for each matter?
Yeah.
We would have that.
Thank you.
We definitely have that.
I think the intent here, okay, unless there's an objection to have that accounting of those major items that are affecting our budget, okay, and we need to get an accounting of it, because we've been talking about it forever. We just need to put the pedal to the metal and get it done now, I think.
Very good, we'll add those items to the list, and we'll let you know, how many we're able to complete in a given year cycle, to
Great.
see if we're gonna be able to do a 3-year cycle.
Yes, Juanita?
I have a question, because this has come up just lately, although I've heard it before. When somebody replaces an appliance, they take out the GE and they put in a new Samsung that has the computer on the door and all of this kind of stuff. Is that theirs then? And when they move out, they can take it with them? Or does it have to stay in the unit? And what if they don't turn back, because I know they're supposed to, but a lot of people
Right.
don't, turn back the appliance that they are replacing? Now, if we're replacing them, I know we take the old ones back, but if they're replacing them, they often don't turn them back.
Right, so once they replace the units that's in there, they own it. It's an alteration, so it becomes theirs.
So if they
One-
move out, we have to then furnish a new,
That is correct.
Appliance.
If they replace a unit that has some life left on them, they can ask us for a reimbursement, and we evaluate what that is, and they get a reimburse if they return a unit, if they call us to do that. Otherwise, they don't get anything, but that's essentially how.
replacement unit is theirs, and they can take it with them when they move.
Yes.
Okay, so just to close this particular discussion out, we're going to see about adding those checklists to their list of things to do on appliances, and you're going to let us know whether or not it's going to affect the 3-year program. Is that, everybody okay with that? All right. Okay, so where are we now? Solar production report. Yes.
Okay, I looked at the production report, and I'm concerned, I averaged out, you gave me the numbers of how many panels are in each place, and it looks to me like we've got a problem at 91. It's location 91. I did an averaging, and it came out that there should be about 39 per panel, and 91's giving us 32. So is there a method to have a check if there's shading on 91? I was hoping Ken would be here and we could get him to put the drone up.
No, we can certainly ask Phoenix to take a look at it, to see if there's a shading problem there. And you said London 91?
Yeah, 91 is much lower than the others.
We will certainly look at that.
We got the contract with them or not?
The contract was forwarded to them. We're waiting
Okay.
for them to give us the proposal for the changes.
Okay.
Now, Sue has noted an anomaly here in 91, but Phoenix didn't mention it. So, I mean, don't they usually?
I have to see what the discrepancy is. Is it like 1 kilowatt hour? Is it, I mean, I have no idea.
Okay, I
So-
have no idea.
Yeah,
So,
and
if
I
it's-
shouldn't be the one that's
Yeah.
finding the anomalies, hopefully.
But if
in
the anomaly
future.
is minuscule, they're not going to look at it.
And that may be the answer. I
Right. That
may
really
be
don't
the
have a clue.
answer.
I don't know.
I don't know
Well,
either.
it's 32 and all the rest are in the 40s. So
Yeah,
that's
so
a
it
fair
could be,
amount.
well, I don't know what that equates
I don't-
to.
Over
know.
the whole month and so forth.
I don't know what that equates
But we'll
to.
have-
Last month,
we'll have a look at 'em.
it was in the same ballpark as the others. So this month, there was a change on that spot. That's what I
We'll have
saw.
them look at it.
Okay.
Yeah, because the thing, if there is a change over a month's time period, then somebody should at least be quizzical and say, gee, I wonder why there is a change, But anyway, because we've already had that come to Jesus meeting with Phoenix, and they said, oh, no, we definitely, take charge. So I just want to make sure that they're looking at it from that perspective.
The other thing is that Steve Leonard has brought up a possibility of why we aren't getting our full capacity. And we don't have any drawings or list of what equipment is there. Do we have any specifications? I know that you got a parts list. Does that come with the specifications on the parts? Or can we draw one up from that?
Well, we're not going to draw specifications, either they were provided or not, and we can research, do a Google search, see if we can find those specs. Many of those panels are manufactured and then they stop manufacturing them.
Not the the inverters is what he's saying.
The inverters, I believe that there's specs for those, so if you're interested in those, we can, see if we can find them and then we can forward them to you.
Okay, well, we would like to take a look at that. We're interested in
Yeah.
one of the problems.
Yeah,
maybe.
if it's available, we can, make it available to you.
And did we get the JCI report?
Actually, we just, Chris just emailed them on that, and they will be providing that, was it a month or 2 months?
I believe it was 1 to 2 months.
1 to 2 months, so.
Really quick, eh?
I'm just relaying their information.
And that's a year late.
With regard to what Sue mentioned regarding what, Steve has come up with, okay? Again, he's not an expert in solar, he'd be the first to say it, okay? But he's been looking at some data and what have you, and he has a theory, and that is just a theory, okay? Maybe even a hypothesis, okay? That the possibility exists that the inverters are not capable of doing the DC to AC conversion that the actual solar panels are delivering to it because they're topping out, okay? And if they would have provided us with inverters that were at the next category, the price would have jumped, okay? Because sometimes, you reach a certain peak and then it's a step function at that point. So that was a theory that he had, and he passed that by me as a possibility. So I just shared it with Sue, since she's chairman of the Solar Task Force, and we probably need to just go down that road and see if that's something that we see as a possible problem that we have here, or not problem, but some sort of an anomaly that we need to address.
So if we find the specifications, we'll forward them to you.
Thank you.
One question.
Yes.
If you really look at it, the entire production for June 19 has gone down by 17%. That one outlier, number 91, doesn't really
Well,
stand
we've
out
had-
when you look at the
You
total
have the
number.
morning fog, which you didn't have in May. You've got to look at,
Yeah, so most of this could be climate related.
Yeah.
Rather than,
no, I agree that most of it is climate related.
Yes.
But there is an outlier. You see, it was at 10, it's at 10.
10.6 versus 15.7, you were saying. Yes, it's a little bit more in that, but the total,
But it won't make any difference, it'll make a difference on the total, but
yeah, the whole
it was
total
another
is
3.
17%
It
lower.
would be 3 more on the total, which would give us 101.
It depends on the angle the sun is going to hit those panels.
Well,
You know,
There's
There's a
a
number of things.
large number of variables.
Yes.
there are a
Yeah.
large number of
So
variables.
that outlier that you're saying.
But
it
if you
means-
look at the month before, it was in line with, I mean, it's,
Yeah,
yeah.
but
it's-
between
yeah,
this
we
month and
just
last
need
month, the
to-
sun has moved umpty degrees, okay?
Well, maybe.
Maybe.
We don't know. Yes.
I have a question. If you recall, Ernest, I asked months ago about drawings on inverters, locus panel, etc., which Chris looked at it, and apparently we don't have it except single line diagrams.
That is correct. Whatever we provided you is what we have. So you may want to share that with Sue and see if that's what Sue's looking for.
No, that's not what I'm looking for.
Okay, that's what we have then.
asking is that, is there a new development? Have you done anything else to get?
No,
some-
we have not. We have not. We
How
looked,
can we go about it then?
Can we
a
ask
good-
Phoenix?
That's a good question. Phoenix did not supply
They
the
don't
equipment.
want to because they cannot repair the panels.
Yeah, I think that you
Unless they
can't-
have the drawing. But
Right,
this is their
right.
bread and butter. They're holding it so that they will be hostage to them. But we can get it from other sources like JCI.
If you have a source, you're
No,
welcome
I
to-
don't.
Okay,
I
we
mean,
don't.
it's not up to
We
me to
don't.
get.
We don't have it. We looked,
you looked?
our analyst spent a
Have
few
you-
hours doing that, and what he was able to arrive at was provided to you.
Have you asked JCI?
JCI is not gonna give you anything that they haven't given you already.
But the closeout, in the closeout, nothing was given to us regarding these panels. We don't have anything. So and we have to repair this for years. And if we don't have it, we are stuck with Phoenix. Because they are the only ones who have it. And they don't want to give it to us. So somehow we have to get it. And it's not up to me, it's up to you to think about it.
Well, as I said, we already researched our files, we couldn't find, and Chris did a Google search to try to find the information, and what you got is what he was able to arrive at. So
Get anything.
we can, no, you got line diagrams, didn't you?
No, that was, they had, the first they
Okay.
showed me, I said, I don't want single line diagram, we can
I
even
understand. That's
what
follow
he's saying,
the
that's how I can
wires
get.
and find
I
out.
understand, so you did get something,
got
and
the
that's
single-
what we were able to get. So if you want us to write a letter to JCI requesting it, we can certainly do that, but as you know, we don't have a contract with them anymore.
Yeah, but please do it. Just don't
So
say in
is that the
future.
direction from the committee that we write a letter to JCI requesting specifications on the inverters?
When they finalize this particular plant, I don't know what's in the contract, but it seems to me in 9 times out of 10 cases, you get provided with some documentation so that you can maintain this thing in the future, okay? Now, if they were saying they were gonna do all the maintenance on this thing, which they were not, because they asked us to provide it to Phoenix, then we have no information to do the maintenance on this. We have no information on the serial numbers or the nameplate data on the inverters or what have you, okay? And that information should have been provided to us as a matter of course. And I think if we don't have it, then we should at least ask JCI, we're looking for a couple of things here, okay, and we noticed that we don't have some of this information. I mean, at least a phone call to them or something, okay? Because how do you maintain that particular thing, if you, I mean, this is not a refrigerator, okay, whereby they figure that you're gonna call Sears or whatever, okay? This is something that we could maintain or at least hire somebody to maintain, and we should have gotten the information that we need in order to do that.
Yeah, and I believe that's the premise, that you hire somebody to do the maintenance, and they would know what to do with that. So we're
So
not gonna,
they have to-
we're not
so-
gonna send our staff to go out there
No,
and take the
No.
thing apart.
No, I'm
You know.
asking, so does Phoenix have this data then?
Apparently they do, but they did not want to provide it, correct? Reza contacted them directly to talk about this, and this is what he heard.
Yeah, they didn't want to give it to us.
That's correct, so,
Okay, Juanita?
Well, we've talked about a lot of this before, and I think maybe, and he has offered, I think we need to involve Jeff. From a legal point of view, he has offered to write a letter, number one, what he did when we canceled
Right.
the maintenance contract. But if there are certain things that we feel we should have gotten as an end of project that we did not, that we do not have, I think we should ask for it, and maybe he can work with you to determine those, and he can ask for them with the veiled threat of, if we don't get what we paid for, at least in the public, if you want a reference from us, or if you don't want us to go out and dish you publicly, you better give us what we need.
no, we can certainly do that. That's why I'm looking for direction. If you want us to write a letter to JCI, we'll go ahead and do that and request it.
Here's the issue here, okay? And I agree totally with what Juanita has indicated, but because we had Phoenix as our maintenance and operation expert or whatever it is, okay? We hired them during that time period. JCI knew that they were going to be the ones that were going to be the caretaker of this thing, okay? So as a result of that, they may have funneled that information over to Phoenix, and because they were going to do the work and just bypassed us because we didn't ask that question of them, okay?
Right, so that's
So
what,
now Phoenix has got that information, and maybe the way Phoenix was asked for this information was not something they understood. Maybe we need to have another phone call with them, possibly with you on the phone with them and us, okay? Indicating, what's the story? Did you get that information? Do you have it? If you have it, why can't you give it to us? And blah, 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 okay?
Well, not why can't you give it to us,
Before
give
we
it
go
to
to JCI and get embarrassed by the fact that JCI said, I gave it to Phoenix, okay? So somehow we need to find out if Phoenix has it first. If they don't have it, then how the hell are they doing any of the work that they need to do on this particular thing without drawings and some sort of nameplate data or what have you? How do you do that? Okay, I don't know how you do it.
Phoenix is a third-party contractor, and we could change that at any time.
Understood.
If we have the data, and that's
Understood.
what we need to emphasize.
But-
It's not just Phoenix.
I'm trying to find out if JCI handed the stuff over to them. If they did, then Phoenix should be handling some of that stuff. We should have copies of it in our archives.
we'll reach out to Phoenix. I believe that Chris did that already, but we can certainly reach out to them again and find out if they have it, and why wouldn't they provide it?
And if they don't have it, then how are they actually doing whatever maintenance and what have you they need to do on this thing, should there be corrective maintenance required, okay? How are they gonna do it? Somebody needs to answer that question.
When I talked to them, they told me they don't have it. But it can be true.
Oh, that they
Because
don't
if you
have it.
don't have it, you cannot repair it. If they're repairing it, it means they have it. But they don't want to give it.
Well, I don't know that, okay? So let's not be accusatory here, please, okay? We're going to play the role of Columbo, okay, the TV detective, okay? I'm just trying to find out what the story is here, okay? So we'll go to Phoenix, find out for sure. If Phoenix says no, they never got anything from JCI, then JCI owes us that data. They owe us the data because we paid for it.
Yeah, so let's, if Phoenix says they don't have it, and we go to JCI.
Right.
Carl,
Thanks.
who reviews our contracts? Because it's been my experience that before you pay the last 10%, you get your O&M manual.
Yeah,
your
well, we
record
went through
drawings.
this, we had a punch list, okay, and, that's another story altogether.
It was not.
It may not have been done that way or what have you, okay, that was such in the past. Right now, we need to resurrect this issue and find out from Phoenix if they've got the data. If they don't have the data, and JCI needs to give us the data.
Do we owe them any money?
No,
Are we paying for a maintenance fee?
we're paying the maintenance fee to Phoenix.
We
But not to
can't-
JCI, we
We
can't.
can't
to JC.
leverage that for the O&M manual?
Not from Phoenix, no.
They've got to have it. Somebody's got to have it.
Somebody has to have an O&M manual, and that's the right term, okay? The O&M
We'll-
manual
we'll
is
find
usually
out.
what you get when you have a complicated system such as this, okay? And if they didn't give it to us, then shame on us for not asking for it, and shame on them for not giving it to us.
And we should have at least
What
6 copies of it.
Juanita said, I think it's the best way to do it. If Phoenix doesn't have it, we have to get the lawyer involved to talk, to send a
Well,
letter
we
to
can
the
ask
lawyer.
nicely of JCI first, because as soon as you get lawyers involved, then all of a sudden, everybody gets all upset. Let's ask first, and then we'll go to the lawyer.
Try to get it.
That's all we need to do. Okay, so that's it.
With the
Anything
final
else?
report that they're sending us in 2 to 3.
There you go.
Anything else on 12? Okay. Item 13, as I mentioned in my opening statement here, okay, I think for the most part, we are in the process of updating the report to smooth out some things and make sure that certain things are clarified, and we'll get that done over the next month or two, or whatever. Yes, Sue?
I want to make sure that it goes on television, and it'll be on, again on Friday. I did misspeak when I was on television on TV6 on July 5th, that we spent $30 million on this project, and I meant to say 3 million. I want to, if it infected anybody, I'm sorry, but I made the faux pas, and excuse me.
So unless anybody has an, yes.
No, only one quick question. Why do we have that report twice in this?
Okay, the report is in here because, one, it was attached to the minutes, okay, for the meeting report from last meeting, okay?
Yeah,
And then
identical.
secondly, it's in there because of the fact that we were going to discuss it under item 13, okay?
okay.
So that's why it's twice.
So, okay. are
We
you
didn't
gonna
stutter,
discuss it?
trust me.
We're going to revise it.
We're going to revise, we're in the
Yeah,
process
so
of
you don't wanna
revising
waste
it. We've-
time.
We've already come through the first draft of the revision, okay? So it's a work in progress, okay? And I'm sorry if we had stuff in there that may not have been totally valid, but it was based on the information we had. We did the best we could with the current information we had. We got some more information since then, and we're fixing it. And, you know, hey, it's a work in progress. So I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, so if there's nothing else that wants to be said about the Solar Power Plant Task Force report, yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to put Ernesto on the spot. Ernesto, do you feel that the solar plant project is viable and is improving, or is it a waste of time?
So your question is the solar system that was installed viable? It is viable. It is producing what is designed to produce. The panels that you have, the inverters that you have, is what was installed. It has reduced your energy consumption significantly. I think the question is it producing what it's supposed to be producing as per the contract? And I think that's very debatable. We feel that it's not. We feel that it's low. But if you look at the numbers, the system is producing much better than last year. That doesn't mean that's going to change next year. There's multiple variables affecting the productivity of the system. You know, there's shading, there's dust, there's the angles, there's just a number of things. So I think that it's a very good. It was a very good project. It was very wise for the community to install it. I think it's reduced your costs considerably. I think that if we see tariffs go up from Edison, you have a buffer, and you'll be able to even reduce your ROI related to the installation of the system. So all around is very good. You reduce your ecological footprint. There's just a large number of reasons as to why this was a good move. So with that, hopefully I answered your question somewhere along there.
You did. Thank you. Okay, items for future agenda. 2020 Building and Cul-de-sac Address Sign Installation Program, copper pipe supply, line leak report, and the drainage improvements to prevent foundation issues. And then we were also going to add something to the, excuse me? Shepherd's Crook
Yeah.
is that item. Anything else that anybody here in the committee feel that needs to?
Mr. Chair, if I may suggest, you may want to remove the drainage improvements to prevent foundation issues unless you want me to discuss that in further detail, but we're doing what you directed us to do. If there's anything else you want us to do with that, we'll be happy to do that.
You were going to look into getting the bid for the.
We're going to go ahead that. It doesn't require you to act on it any further. We'll go ahead and get proposals, and we'll get going with that. And we'll spend a portion of the money that's left over in your contingency funds to do that. And
Is this not a tickler list also?
we could bring something back to you and let you know what we're doing relative
Well,
to that.
items
if you
for
want us
future
to.
agendas don't mean next month.
Yeah,
They
no,
just
I
mean
realize that.
to memorialize it so we know in the future, we may be
Right,
looking
just
at
a
that when
tickler
you have your
file.
report.
So you
I
can
think,
leave it
I
at
think
that.
we should leave that on there, okay, because we got this work in progress issue that we're working on right now. Okay, So we're now down to concluding business unless somebody else has anything else they want to. Yes, Walt?
I have two quick items. One's a report on the electrical vehicles. There are no as-bills to figure out what the power loads are at the carports. So it's gonna require looking at original drawings or going out and physically looking at the panels.
I think we should add that to our agenda.
I was gonna recommend that.
If I may point out, you already have work in progress on that. You did retain the services of a TEC, the Energy Coalition, to look at infrastructure in your carports and to look at infrastructures in general. They've submitted a draft report onto staff. Staff is reviewing that draft report, and it will be presented to the committee. In fact, I would recommend that we bring that report directly to the committee instead of going through the Energy Commission, the Energy Task Force. And the reason for that is that you pay for it,
One more step.
and it will be one more step. So we can certainly do that.
So I would put it on the items for future agenda as a tickler item when it's ready.
We can certainly do that. And it's also in your project log as well.
Okay.
And my
And then-
my last item, you mentioned see something, say something. For those that don't know, who do they call? Facilities?
Resident services.
Resident services.
Thank you.
I went directly to Ernesto, but we have a rapport.
I don't know if this,
Carl Sheets.
Resident service.
thank you.
I have a question here from Ernesto. Last year we talked a lot in alteration about as building the drawings, and they were supposed to do something on it, but then he died away, the chief of alteration in the staff changed, and I haven't heard anything
Yeah.
since.
So if I may, let me flesh this out for you. We have very, very poor as-bills for our plumbing, our electrical, in our buildings. Unfortunately, when they build these buildings, typically when you build a building and you complete the construction, you request the contractor to take a red pen and mark up all of the changes that were made, and there were a lot of changes made to these buildings when they were under construction. So your base maps, your base drawings that you use to build these things are no longer very reliable in terms of where things are at. So what Riz is bringing up was the possibility of going out and hiring somebody to create as-built drawings. And I believe Brett Hudson looked into that, looked at the cost related to that, and he felt that it was not something he wanted to recommend at the time. So that's where it ended up. I think you were working with Brad and whoever else in Manor Alterations, and the decision was that it was not cost effective to do that.
Yeah, I
Now,
think the cost is over 100,000.
the way we addressed any issues with our plumbing is the staffing that we have know exactly where stuff is at, and as they do address it, they're making notes, for other people that are coming after them, and they're addressing it in that manner. But I believe your intent was, Reza, to hire somebody to actually go out and create all of the as-bills, correct?
No, that was the last point. I found out that there is outfits that do infrared photography, and it brings out everything that has vanished due to time. So it gives you a much better a base drawing. Once we get that, I have done some with my hand, which I can show you. There's a lot of ways you can read the things and make it. Once that is done, you can put it in the CAD, and the drawing for that, the cost which was given last year was ridiculous by the staff guy, I forgot his name, Weinman. He said $1,000 per each drawing. I have done it for $100. So then there is not many.
You're
because
hired.
Huh?
Essentially, what Kurt did,
But
he went
just
out.
let me finish.
He
please.
went out and he got prices.
No, he just told in the meeting that he's talked to his girlfriend, who's an architect,
Right.
who has this friend $1,000 figure. But these are very simple drawings. They think there's not too much in them because originally they haven't put a lot of things in it. So it can be done in a matter of few hours. I have done CAD myself. So even your staff, Gavin, who's a good CAD person, you can ask him to see how long will it take, one sample of it. So it can be done in-house, and they're typical. There's not 2,000 drawings. For every floor plan, there's one drawing. So number of floor plans, 18 or 20, we have the 18 or 20 drawings for electrical and same for plumbing. So we're talking about 40, 50 drawings. And once we do that, the plumbers who go to do repairs, they can have a printout copy of it, and the things missing, they can update whenever they go to do things. So gradually we can improve it, and we'll have something then, which is better than having nothing like we have now. Thank you.
Okay. At this particular point in time, we might as well go around the room. Start with Walter. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I guess that was his, well, it wasn't meant that way, but that's okay.
And I
So-
have,
Good meeting, and I think I would like to volunteer Reza to look into the drawings. I think it's much, much, much more than 45 drawings. Because there's a lot of,
I can show you.
okay, then you accept the challenge and work, see if you can do it.
Juanita?
My comment is on the city permit issue, which has been coming up, and we get a lot of complaints about how long it takes to get the city permits. And of course, it comes back on us because everybody thinks we're holding it up, and we're not. We try to explain that, but it doesn't quite go over. I have talked to the city. Supposedly, they now have a new permit inspector, just started last week, I think, and they think it's going to improve. But I'm really concerned that we need to keep on them about this because the repercussions come back to us. We're the ones that are seen as holding everything up, and we're not.
One quick
No,
comment.
absolutely. That's a very good comment. I'm sorry, Cash, if I may, real quick. Jeff Parker is aware of this issue, and I believe he's having discussions with Chris Macon as to how we can better improve that, because you're absolutely correct. It is our critical path in many instances, and we look like we're not performing, and it's actually, we're just waiting for a permit from the city. So we're very hopeful that that situation will improve.
Okay, well, just for your information, as you probably know, Chris has been out for over a month on medical leave. He comes back on Tuesday of next week, so.
So I'll bring it up with Jeff again, make sure it's on his plate.
One thing, I do have a meeting scheduled with Cynthia and you and me, three of us, sometime in next 10 days. Just a casual meeting.
Okay.
Okay, thanks.
Cynthia Connor, so if you're good, if you put a little bug in her.
didn't know we were on a first name basis. Anyway, I don't have any additional things. I think I spoke enough today. So the date of the next meeting.
By the way, I hope you'll do that on Friday.
Thank you.
Same thing.
Date of the next meeting is October 23rd, and I think we can adjourn unless somebody's gotten on something else. Okay.